So, hello, good morning, everyone. My name is Sérgio Carrera. It's a pleasure for me to be invited to host this live streaming interview with a very good friend of mine, actually. Somebody I had the opportunity to work with. We're going to be talking a little bit about the British police system and organized crime. So Mr. Martin Brennan, welcome. Thank you so much for being with us today. Now it's okay.
Yeah, I can hear you, Sergio. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we have Martin directed from. I'm not sure if he's in Birmingham right now in the UK, but we always think he's in Birmingham.
Yeah, it's probably easier to think that I'm in Birmingham. I'm slightly on the outskirts of Birmingham, but Birmingham's fine, Sergio.
That's good because we can talk about this a little bit later on the show about him being a real Peaky Blinder, a real original Peaky Blinder. But Martin, thank you so much for being with us today. It's a pleasure and an honor to have you and be able to speak to the Brazilian audience. Not only Brazilian audience, because we have people from Portugal listening. Our friend Jose, he's watching us. We have people from Europe and other countries as well watching. So this is a good chance to listen to all this background you have to talk about not only organized crime but a little bit of the British police. That'll be fantastic.
Brilliant. No, it's a pleasure to see you again, Sergio, and I'm really excited to talk a little bit about the Peaky Blinders, but more importantly, the British policing system to help share the knowledge across Europe and the globe by the sounds of it. So really happy to be here. Thank you.
That's great. I'm going to read very quickly. I don't know what's going on. Is it better now? Maybe my phone is not that good. I'll try it. So very briefly, I'm gonna present Martin Brennan. Wagner, eu acho que é você que está com problema, não é não? Tá com fone? Eu não tô com fone. Okay. So let's try to keep. So Martin Brennan is a detective superintendent working with the Regional and Organized Crime Unit. He has recently been seconded to the United Nations Police as a serious and organized crime advisor. He has over 30 years experience leading and reviewing covert investigation, demand-led kidnaps, and operations targeted towards high-risk individuals or groups engaged within serious and organized crime. He has designed and delivered significant change projects within regional confidential units and implemented prevent strategies to encourage early interventions and divert youngsters from being drawn into or continue a role with organized crime. He has supported many individuals in their career and personal development and is passionate about supporting colleagues to deliver the very best outcome to protect the public. Martin is motivated by continuous development and learning from good practice and failure. He has a strong emphasis on well-being, which he sees as essential to a healthy work-life balance. Outside work, he's a keen mountaineer and skier, combining his leadership skills with his passion from the outdoor. He has successfully led over 30 charity expeditions across the globe, including Nepal, Africa, South Africa, and dog sledding in the Arctic Circle. He's still working on his Spanish and practicing, and too bad, and and consistently ordering the wrong dishes at tapas bar. This is a very good CV, short bio from Martin. Martin, I'm not going to spend too much time talking because you're the big feature today. So once again, thank you for making yourself available. And to start off, it would be very interesting to give Brazilians a general understanding on how the British police system is organized.
Okay. So again, once again, good to see you, Sergio, and really nice to hopefully see or virtually be in contact with all the people that have dialed in online today. So hello from the UK to everybody that's either listening live or we'll have a look at this chat some size. So Sergio, the UK police really, in a sort of summary, it's split into sort of three main regions really. So you've got the national crime agency, so they look at the national sort of the police. You look at the regional police and you look at local. So the UK policing is very set up from local to regional to national. And the reason for that is that the UK policing that's been going on for a couple hundred years now is very much policing for the community, and there's a line between the regional to local to regional and regional to national. And obviously that national crime agency that we have as well can then reach out across internationally to all other law enforcement partners. So yeah, it's probably best to just describe it as you've got the national crime agencies, you've got the regional crime units, and then you've got local police forces, which there are 43 local police forces covering the United Kingdom.
Okay, we see that besides those 43 territorial forces, you also there are also some maybe some national law enforcement, as you said, like the border force, immigration enforcement, some other institution, but they have very specific assignments, I assume.
Yeah, that's correct. I mean, most of the sort of the immigration and UK border force, home off, sort of revenue as well, so taxes, they have separate organisations, but they sit pretty much or definitely aligned to the National Crime Agency. So when you come to the UK through an airport, you'll see UK border force. That they deal with all immigration, and so yeah, you'll have specific departments and organisations that also look at other elements of law enforcement. But the three main ones are the National Crime Agency, regional, and local territory. But then with UK border force and immigration and things like that as well. So yeah, there are additionalities to that, but they all sort of talk to each other as well. They don't work completely separate.
Okay. In regards to those 43 territorial police forces, are they independent on their own? I mean, are they run, let's say, the police commissioner or the police constable? How I think that's the proper word in the UK. Are they independent? And if they're independent in their area of responsibility, is there any national body in order to standardize the procedure, standardize the doctrines, SOPs, and things like this, or each one goes on their own and to ensure and to enforce the law?
So it's a bit of both, if I'm brutally honest with the answer. So what each police force, so all of those 43 police forces will have a chief constable who's in charge of that force, They also have what they call a police crime commissioner, who is like a locally elected politician, if you like, that holds that chief constable to account for that area. So in theory, that chief constable is responsible for the staffing, how the forces ran, and you know, sort of local policing. But all the 43 forces work under one legal system. So you won't have one force out of those 43 having a completely different legal system. They all work under sort of the law of the UK land, if you like. So enforcing that shouldn't be any different from whether you're in Birmingham or Liverpool or London. Police officers will be using the same powers of arrest and the same court systems and things like that. So what that then gives is that each chief is called the sort of National Police Chiefs Council. So they're the sort of umbrella of those 43 chief constables. So when they want to go back to, so let's say, the politicians in the Home Office or ministers in the Home Office, there's a body of chief constables that can represent the 43, if that makes sense. So yes, each chief constable runs that force in their own way that they see fit, but it's under the same rules and guidance and legislation and to ministers back in the centre.
Like here in Brazil, we have 20, let's say 26 states and one federal district, and each one has their own police department, their own structure. But once we are a federation, the governments of each state has their own government, and they are autonomous, so they don't have
I'm
to
sorry,
really...
Sergio, I can see you speaking, but I can't hear you, my friend.
Okay. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? No. Hello? No. 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 Can hear him. Wagner. Can you hear me, Mark?
I think I can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, my friend. Carry on. Sorry,
Okay.
I missed you a little bit.
Okay, great. Over here in Brazil, we have 26 states and one federal district, and they have like some sort of independent. They have their autonomy. So even though the police institutions, they look alike, but they have some differences. There are some differences, and we don't have a national body to standardize, even though, because it's not mandatory. You know, when we have a national proposition to standardize some sort of procedure, if it's not a federal law, it doesn't have a law power. You know, it doesn't have executive power at that legislation. So it's very interesting to see that all constables they are represented in this national body in order to issue national legislation, national procedures. So on the same line of thinking, I don't know what's going on today. Are the police department structures the same or similar?
Similar, but all forces will have to deliver a certain service. So, for instance, all of them have to deliver 24/7 police service. So you'll have like the front line cops, if you like, front line officers, that all of those 43. So wherever you are in the UK, if you ring the emergency line, you will get a service, whether it be the top of the UK or the bottom. So they all provide that service. And they all provide very similar services as well in terms of crime investigation, riot patrol, public order, traffic. special investigations. So each force will be slightly different in terms of there might be more in one department than others, but it would be very unusual to go to one force and they have no capacity or capability to deal with a certain crime. They all are able to do that. I suppose the only kind of exceptions to that, and over the 30 years that I've been in the police service, it's changed quite a lot. So, for instance, some forces still have the mounted branch, so horses. They have horses to deal with crowd control, reassurance, and things like that, where some of the forces won't have any horses at all. They just don't see the need for them, and they've invested more time and money in other capabilities. But pretty much, your general policing, your specialized policing, and your investigations, each force will be fit for purpose, if you like, to do that. And they're inspected every year as well to make sure that they are efficient and effective of doing that. So there's a separate independent body called the Her Majesty's Inspection that will come in to that police force and see how effective they are at firearms, road policing, public order, things like that. So yeah, the general answer is yes, but there'll be slightly different nuances where that capacity is required or not. We've got no horses in Birmingham.
No horses in Birmingham.
No, so that's the example why I give you that. But we used to, when I first joined, we had police horses, and they're very effective. That many police services across the globe will say in public order. One horse can represent 20 police officers charging through a crowd, if you like, a football crowd if it's an aggressive crowd. So there are certain exceptions, but generally everyone delivers the same service in those 43 forces.
That's great. We do have here the police unit. Actually, have two. You are a detective superintendent, right? There is always this debate in Brazil about how or which should be the best police structure. In the career for police officers in the country, because there are a lot of questioning about our current model, current type. I'm gonna try to speak slowly because my computer is giving some problem. So just for us to understand quite well, does everybody that join the police department, they do the same training and academy, and then after that they are volunteer, they do their effort to be promoted, or you can do something like join the police to be street officer, or join the police to be chief directly?
So yeah, it's changed over the last couple of years, but the general answer is that everybody joins the police service as a police constable. So the first rank really in the service. So everybody joins at that rank. However, over the last kind of 5 to probably 10 years, there's been a big debate about direct recruits, and direct being coming in at an inspector level, so 2 levels above the rank of constable. And that we've seen some success with that, and we've actually seen some forces experiment with people coming in at superintendent level, so straight at my directorate level, straight in at that. So that's still sort of going through that phases of recruitment, but they are more the exception than the norm, really. So those officers that will come in as either an inspector or a superintendent have probably got experience in either the military or in business at a management level, so they can sort of they're comfortable in that arena in terms of leadership and management. But even when they do come in at that level, they will still go through the recruitment and the sort of what we call a probationary period of 2 years of learning the trade, really. Because what we've found, certainly in the UK policing, is that, you know, to lead a team, to manage a team, like any business, I guess, really, you've got to understand that business. And there's real value in most officers going through that 2-year probationary period as a constable, but being highlighted as a fast track promotion, if you like, so they can learn their trade, learn their skill, and then get promoted fairly quickly after that if they show all the right skills and abilities and can evidence that through promotion boards. But so the majority of people will still go through that, joining at constable, and then go through the promotion levels, like I did. And then there are some that will come in direct as either inspector or as a superintendent, but still learn a bit more about it, because what we found is that, you know, if you come from the military as a superintendent, you know, dealing with communities is different from dealing in war-torn areas. And obviously the British police system is very much set up on community policing. So there's that sort of blend of learning the trade as a constable, working with communities, learning how they sort of work with the police, and go through that system. So majority constables, by exception, you'll have superintendents and inspectors joining as fast track officers.
I see. Yeah, we have something like this in Brazil, and people are kind of debating to change this idea of going straight to the inspector or superintendent level, because they lack a lot of background, police background they should have, you know, working with the community and doing a lot of other stuff they should have done. So yeah, we had a friend that used to be a chief that went straight to general level. I don't even know what that is in police, but because in her country she could go because right directly to the general level, and without any experience on policing and in any management level or executive level. So it's something that we are, let's say, studying different police and always looking looking out to see how the police are having their selection process, you know, joining process, because that really affects the overall. That my understanding affects overall, you know, performance of the institution as a whole. Just to finalize this first part. So you started as a police constable, right?
Yeah.
So for you to be able to be promoted, what was necessary? Which requirements were put in place for you to be able to be promoted? Just give us some examples so we can understand.
So to be promoted, certainly in the UK policing, everybody has to. So the first rank up from constable is sergeant. So it goes from constable, sergeant to inspector. So when I wanted to be a sergeant, no matter where I was, whether I was in West Midlands Police or I was in Liverpool Police, I'd have to sit a national exam. So everybody has to sit the national sergeant's exam. And you're either successful or you're not with that. So if you're successful with the written exam, it's like a 2-3 hour written exam. Then you were then interviewed and what we call a board. So it's like an interview. And if you were successful at that within your force, you could then be promoted as a sergeant. So there's 2 stages. One is the written exam, and the second one is the interview board, if you like. And if you were successful at those two periods, you then became a sergeant. And then for the next rank, which is inspector, the same process. So again, there's an inspector's sort of written exam, like a 2 hour, 3 hour, based on law. And again, if you're successful at that, you then have an interview, and if you're successful at that, you then become promoted to inspector. So for the first 2 ranks, it's written exams and it's an interview. Beyond that, it then becomes more competency based. So when I then became wanted to become a chief inspector, I then just applied to be a chief inspector, and I was interviewed and to see whether I was ready, I was competent, or the force thought that I was the right choice to be a chief inspector. And up and beyond the chief inspector rank, most forces still use that process. So the first couple is really tough, because you have to commit to the studies, and then you have to commit to the board. But then beyond that, it's really on your ability and how you can evidence and demonstrate how you've been a good leader, how you've managed it, and if you can demonstrate that in an interview, the panel can promote you to that rank. And actually, interestingly as well, you can be promoted to a different force. And the good thing about having that national exam is that if a sergeant comes from London to Birmingham, that sergeant has sat the same exam. So you're getting a good standard across all 43 forces. You're not just getting someone promoted because they like somebody. They have to pass that written exam and the board to get promoted. So it's a good, thorough system. It changes slightly, but it's still pretty much ran nationally, and it's a good system.
Okay, that sounds quite fair. It sounds fair enough, especially competence-based promotion. This is something that, let's say, over here we don't have that. I mean, we have like just a theory, but not really in practice. So very few are able to be promoted based on performance. Very interesting to hear about this.
Yeah, and interestingly as well, what can happen is you can get promoted to, say, chief inspector, but you can be on a period of performance as well. So let's say if you had a really good interview and you got through, but actually you weren't that good at your job and you weren't demonstrating it, you could go back down a rank if that was based on performance as well. Also as well, if you were subject to misconduct, if you did something internally or unlawfully, you can get demoted back down to a rank as well through a proper procedure. But so yeah, it's not always perfect. There's always exceptions. We've worked with many people that can say, but I think that transparency is there in terms of, if you're not competent and you haven't done the exams and you've got lucky, you'll be found out probably, because you're thrown in at the deep end and you've got to be able to perform at that level. And so most people are good enough. It's slightly different styles, but they're usually very good at what they do.
Yeah, that's cool. That's very interesting to hear. Just last question. Is that really true that police officers in the UK don't carry a weapon? I think this is something that I remember once we were at work in New York, and somebody said, "Well, you guys don't carry weapons," and you said, "Well, our community, our society, they don't want us to carry weapons, right? So it's just part of our contract, let's put this way." So yeah, can you tell us about it? And in case of, I read the other day that because of the terrorism, you have more specialized armed police units that can be in any place in the UK within 5 minutes. So yeah, just give us this overview about, yes, we do or we don't carry weapons normally, and if so, who can carry during on duty and who cannot?
Right. So yeah. So generally, British police officers, UK cops, will not be armed. And it is interesting because when you speak to colleagues like yourself and across the world in the UN, most people look at me like, what what do you mean you don't carry firearms? But it's been a tradition of the UK policing to be policing by consent, and that is very much in the front and centre of British policing in terms of you know, we policed by the consent of the community, and therefore it's not a military outfit. There are exceptions to that, and it has changed over the years when the threat has changed, obviously. So officers now, frontline officers, most will carry a taser, so the electronic taser. So they will have either a taser or a CS spray to sort of meet the threat, if you like, if that is. But generally, it's only specialised officers that will carry sidearms and firearms, and they are trained to a really high degree. But again, they are on 24/7. So if I was to give you an example, if I was a police officer in Birmingham and it was sent to a call saying there's a man with a firearm and you know, can you go and investigate, I will go there, but I would go with specialized officers who work alongside us 24/7 as well. And that worked good, to be honest, because most officers will assess that situation and go to an incident like that with the appropriate backup. So it isn't that we don't carry firearms at all. It's proportionate and it's necessary when we do. But generally, frontline officers will just carry their handcuffs, their gas, and their tasers. But most of us still rely on our biggest asset, which is our communication skills. And obviously, sometimes that doesn't work because if you're dealing with someone who's perhaps high on drugs or alcohol or really violent, you might just have to, you know, call in for firearms backup for that straight away. But most police officers will go through that level of engagement in terms of talking, engaging, explaining before they go to the enforcement role. So more officers are armed now than when I first joined 30 years ago. You didn't have 24-hour firearms officers, so it definitely has changed, Sergio. In 30 years' time, maybe all British officers will be firearms. I don't know, but for the moment, most aren't, and you have to be a specialised firearms accredited officer to have a firearm with you whilst you're on duty. And that's the most important thing as well. It's on duty. No British police officer has a firearm off duty. So even the specialised officers, unless by exception, when they go home, when they go back to their family, they don't have firearms with them. They don't carry them. They don't have them in the house. They're left in an armory in the police stations.
This is very interesting. Very, very interesting. But that doesn't mean that you don't have a regular practice.
Yeah, so people that are trained as firearms officers, they go through a very, very tough course to become, you know, certified, and then that has to be regularly checked as well. Every month they'll have an assessment, and 6 months, and they get their ticket accredited. If you just got a taser, again, you have to pass a course to do that, and you have to be assessed regularly to do that. And actually as well, if someone was concerned or there was a doubt or someone had a medical history or an incident where they had to be reassessed, that continues as well. So yeah, it's not a one-off. You know, you don't get firearms trained at the beginning of your service and you hand your weapon in at the end of your 30 years. It's regularly checked to see that you're still fit and you still can carry and you can still shoot and you're still safe to do that as well. So yeah, it's a regularly accredited certification to be a firearms officer.
Okay, we have a couple questions from our friend Joseph from Portugal. He's from the Judiciary Police in Portugal. He's asking, how do you guys operate in counterterrorism? That's the first one. And the second one is there a military police in the UK?
So I'll answer the second question first because that's easier. There's not military police in the UK. It's police officers. They call them warranted officers. So they have a warrant card as a police officer. And I know in some other European countries and international countries as well, there's a gendarmerie and the military and things like that. But in the UK, it's police only. The only time that the military will be called in is if it's completely, ground zero, and we need the military to come in to support. But that is very, very rare. The only time that we have the military in really now in the UK is to support on infrastructure. So like for the COVID response, they're helping with the engineering and the testing centres. During the Olympic Games that we had in 2012, the military were doing the searches and things like that. But there are, again, specialist military officers that will work with the counter-terrorism stuff. So the first question, where they will work with certain units within the police where we've got counter-terrorism officers, where the military will work with intelligence and they will join and train with each other, and they'll do joint operations. But again, that's by exception. And it's very well understood, and governance is very, very tough with that. But mostly it is police officers who are specialised, trained in counter-terrorism, delivering that service. And by exception, if the military have to be involved, that will be very closely monitored by government.
We have another one. It's about this goes around all police officers, or most police officers, the role of the Metropolitan Police, Scotland Yard, and people really have that, about movies. And can you just explain very quickly what's the Met Police and what's Scotland Yard, so people can understand better?
Okay, so the Met Police, the Met short is short for Metropolitan Police. So that's the official title. It's called the Metropolitan Police, but everybody will refer to them as the Met. And the Met are one of those 43 forces that we talked about. So it's a territory organisation based in London. But because London's the capital, that's where all the obviously the focus is, if you like, in England. And the Met is the biggest force out of those 43 forces. It's the biggest in terms of numbers of officers, investigators, etc. So the Met is the biggest one and the one well known. But it's if you've got, like, my force is West Midlands in Birmingham. It's the same setup, but it's just in that different geographical area. Scotland Yard is the headquarters, so that's where you'll hear the Scotland Yard. A bit confusing because you think Scotland's up in north, but it's called Scotland Yard. It's where the headquarters for the Metropolitan Police is, and that's recently moved actually. But the title still remains. So it's changed building. So there is a Scotland Yard in London, down by the Parliament. Right by the River Thames. It's a brand new building, but it's still called Scotland Yard, and that's the Metropolitan's headquarters. So just to sort of really summarise that, the Met is one of 43 forces, and Scotland Yard is the headquarters of the Metropolitan Police.
Okay, that makes crystal clear for everybody that sometimes the way it's shown on TV shows, on movies, is that Scotland Yard is one police department. It's a little bit confusing. Sometimes it's Met and Metropolitan. It's a little bit confusing sometimes. Then I have a question that promised to be the last one. It's that, on TV shows as well, it's the possibility, for example, let's say there is a major type of crime that local police, the police from the local department, are not able to. They don't have or experience to investigate or to deal with that type of crime. I've watched it that sometimes within the UK, one police officer from another police department with more experience can be kind of landed, can be redeployed temporarily to a different department to assist and to help, and sometimes even to conduct the investigation or any other type of crime. Is that really possible or not?
So many years ago, when crime was, the picture of crime was changing, some forces were perhaps ahead of the game, so you'd have specialized officers from different regions where other forces didn't. Now most forces can deal with their own threat and investigation, but what we have is, when we go back to that National Police Council that I talked about right at the beginning, where all the chiefs are one together as a council, we have something called mutual aid. So most of that mutual aid will come in terms of public order, demand, and things like that. So the Olympics is a good example. So when London Olympics were here in 8 years ago, 2012, obviously the Met, where most of the Olympics were in London, would be too stretched to deal with all that. So mutual aid from all officers from all over the 43 forces would come and support that host force in delivering that service, if you like. So that's an example where I came down to the Met and I worked in intelligence during that period to support the Metropolitan Police to deliver that service. So that mutual aid agreement between the chief constables is always there, because demand can go up and down, and you can put the call in, if you like, to do that. But in terms of general policing, most forces can deal with their own demands, and then if they can't deal with that demand, if it's a crime demand, this is where the regional organised crime units will help for that region. So where I work at the moment, the regional organised crime unit, there's 9 regions that cover those 43 forces, sorry. And within that region, so my region at the moment in the West Midlands, we cover 4 areas. So we cover West Midlands Police, we cover Staffordshire Police, we cover Warwickshire Police, and we cover West Mercia. So it's all in that region, if you like. But that regional crime office can go anywhere in that region to support any of those chief constables. So that's that second level of support, really, that rather than Birmingham really struggling, we can go and support Birmingham Police, West Midlands Police, help them out. But likewise, if it's in Staffordshire, which is on the edge of the area, if they've got a real problem with crime, we will go there. We don't stop at the border of Birmingham and go, oh no, we can't deal with that. We deal with it as a regional command, if you like, and support that chief constable. And there are 9 regional crime units that deliver that all across the height and low of the UK.
That's very nice. This is very nice. This type of cooperation to support the other agencies. I see this as highly professional, actually. Professional. Martin, I'm gonna give you a couple of minutes. You can drink some water or your tea as I go through some. Yeah, you can have your tea. So I'm gonna just take you out of the screen for a couple of minutes, just so you can have some water, stretch your legs. So then we'll come back and talk about organized crime and the real thing that you're the master of. So
Okay, brilliant. I'll go have a cup of tea.
great. So now we're gonna just go through a few. I think I can speak in Portuguese. Acho que agora eu posso falar em português. Vamos mostrar agora algumas das atividades do cidadão SSP, né? Para os próximos dias. Nós já tivemos essa live com o policial da Califórnia, Léo Teixeira, foi na semana passada. Aí temos um merchandise aí promovido pelo cidadão SSD. São livros de inglês para policial, com temáticas policiais, português e inglês. Para quem tiver interesse, fica aí à disposição. Na quarta-feira, dia 20, nós faremos aqui no CidadaoSSP, teremos o Eugênio Ricas, delegado da Polícia Federal, e exerce a função de adido atualmente nos Estados Unidos, e vamos falar sobre o papel do adido da Polícia Federal nos Estados Unidos e a importância da cooperação internacional para a repressão de aos crimes transnacionais. Quarta-feira, 20 horas, horário de Brasília. Temos mais alguma? Temos aqui o lançamento do livro do Wagner Soares de Lima, do CidadaoSSP, o complexo, acho que tem um cursor que está acima, isso. O complexo do gladiador e eu não consigo ver aqui, a policial militar e tá me faltando aqui antes do policial militar, me faltou. Digamos que haverá uma live também na quarta-feira, dia 27 de maio, às 19 horas, sobre segurança universitária. Como proteger sem controlar. É possível? Então, será um evento gratuito, né, online, é uma boa oportunidade para debater um tema debater algo que está sempre no noticiário, está sempre sendo discutido e até judicializado em muitos casos, né? Quem tem direito, quem pode, a quem compete. Então, temos aqui algumas pessoas com vasto conhecimento na área de segurança, né? Tem o Michael França, ou Michael, não sei como é que soletra, Reginaldo Ferreira, nosso amigo Wagner Soares e o Rodolfo Marinho, que estarão aí debatendo sobre a segurança universitária no Brasil. Eu acredito que deverão, com certeza, ter um estudo de caso, fazer algum estudo de caso. E hoje nós estamos aqui no intervalo da live, né, já tivemos a primeira parte, conversamos um pouco com o Martin Brennan, que é detetive superintendente da polícia no Reino Unido, de um dos 43 departamentos policiais do Reino Unido, como ele me falou. Essa primeira parte foi uma pincelada, né, sobre o modelo de polícia, o sistema de polícia no Reino Unido, como é que ele é dividido na esfera nacional, a esfera regional, a esfera local. 43 departamentos de polícia, que são os 43 departamentos que realmente realizam o policiamento, digamos assim, do ostensivo ao judiciário como um todo, né, eles fazem tudo. Tem alguns órgãos federais, que a gente chama federais, ou seja, nacionais, no caso do Reino Unido, e tem outras variações também, outros tipos de órgãos de law enforcement, né, no Reino Unido, que têm responsabilidades muito específicas, né, como a ferroviária, como algumas outras que existem lá. Então, a gente percebe também que é algo até interessante, né, esse conhecimento de hoje também. Nós trabalhamos juntos por um ano em Nova York, eu e o Martin, e eu sempre, né, naquela coisa de buscar informações sobre modelos de polícia, sistemas diferentes, modelo comparado. É muito interessante ver que Reino Unido, apesar de ser um reino, apesar de ser teoricamente algo único, assim, teoricamente, mas não, né, bem diverso, bem multifacetado, muitos órgãos de segurança pública, muitos órgãos nacionais, regionais, locais. Como ele disse aqui, né, como ele disse, temos a entrada é única, né, foi o caso dele, tem 30 anos de serviço, está num cargo alto hoje, num posto, numa patente elevada hoje, mas passou aí desde o começo, né, foi progredindo na carreira por mérito próprio. Isso é muito interessante, e o Reino Unido não tem no Reino Unido esse sentimento de eu tenho que ser promovido, ou eu devo ser promovido porque eu entrei na polícia. Não, é por mérito. A pessoa tem que estudar, tem que se preparar, tem que passar por prova, tem que passar por uma banca, tem que ter uma ficha limpa, como ele mesmo falou, casos de má conduta, né, ou até mesmo de crime, o policial, se não for expulso, ele pode ser rebaixado de patente. Então, isso é interessante. Assim como é interessante algo mais recente que ele falou, de cerca aí de alguns anos, alguns departamentos de polícia estão autorizando o que seria aqui para nós sei lá, um concurso para oficial ou para delegado, mais ou menos, né? Onde a pessoa que já tem uma experiência prévia militar ou de gestão administrativa, ele possa fazer um concurso e entrar diretamente ao nível de inspetor, que seria aqui o nosso equivalente a tenente ou equivalente a delegado. Bem, é difícil falar de carreiras mais curtas, tá bom? Temos mais alguma propaganda, Wagner? Ok, nós temos aqui, se puder ampliar um pouco, no dia 10 de junho, quarta-feira, segurança e prevenção em tempo de Covid. O Wagner Souza, do CidadaoSSP, será o host, será o anfitrião, e a convidada será a doutora, a senhora Suzana Durão, professora e secretária de vivência no campus da Unicamp, doutora em antropologia social e cultural, pesquisadora em segurança pública. Então, doutora Suzana Durão, às 18 horas do dia 10 de junho, quarta-feira, será convidada do CidadaoSSP para essa live que terá o Wagner como o entrevistador. Será que o nosso amigo em Birmingham já está pronto para darmos continuidade? Eu espero que, eu não sei, quer tentar abrir a tela, Wagner? Ok. Eu acho que tem. Quando é que é aquela outra live que nós vamos fazer? Também no dia 2 de junho? É isso? Temos uma também que. Dia 2 de junho. A nossa ideia aqui, né, até para o pessoal saber, conversando com o Wagner, deixa eu ver, tem mais alguma. Vamos discutir um pouco no dia 2 de junho, às 19 horas, horário de Brasília, discutir um pouco sobre modelos de polícia, né? Na verdade, estudos comparados de modelo de polícia e como eles podem ajudar na reflexão sobre o nosso sistema de segurança pública. Eu acho muito, muito interessante esse tipo de proposta, né? Não sei ainda se o Wagner pretende convidar outras pessoas para debater também, porque isso aí interfere em uma série de esferas da atividade e da estrutura policial, né? Desde modelos de treinamento, de formação, a estrutura hierárquica, né? Ou seja, a estrutura da carreira, se ela é única, se ela tem alguma outra, tem alguma outra, se tem mais duas, três, enfim, existe uma série de possibilidades para um debate. Eu espero, inclusive, até acho que interferência lá. Eu acho que até. Ok. Okay, Martin, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Sergio, yeah.
Great. So do you have time to take out your tea? I have my coffee. So cheers, man. Saturday morning. How's the weather over there?
Well, it's been quite nice, but it's I've just put my fleece on because it's not as hot as Brazil, my friend.
Well, right now in Brazil it's kind of weird because it, it's a big country, so the weather changes from region to region. But lately it's a little bit chilly over here. You see, I'm wearing my sweater. It was a little bit chilly, but yeah, it's not that bad. So yeah, so let's talk about the big thing, right? Let's talk about COVID-19 and also the how organized crime is working and trying to interfere nowadays. Um, we of course with the UK perspective, his perspective, your perspective, and I mean, feel free. I'm all ears to hear what you have to say, and I'm sure we are facing here in Brazil a lot of fraud cases, many fraud cases in Brazil. Like yesterday, more than 200. I don't know how you call you call ventilators, like ventilators, because they are very important for extreme cases. So once one mayor bought like 200, none of them work. It's like, so this is becoming like every day on the news. Many problems about, from PPE to ventilators and things that we are. I mean, people are spending a lot of money, and right now they can put uh, as expensive as they can, and people are gonna buy it. So there is no money. There are not many options for at least as we can see now, is that whatever price they put on the market, we're gonna buy it. So even though many of them when they arrive, they are broken, they don't work. So we can see some problem here. But up to you, my friend.
Okay, so yeah, I think for the first time, I guess, in my police career anyway, that internationally we're all dealing with the same problem, the source of which is obviously COVID-19, and it's uncharted territories for many countries, if not all, really. So I think what I'm keen to share with yourselves and the audience really is that the experience that I have in investigating organised crime, serious organised crime or transnational crime, is that there's two real things that an organised crime group will always do, is that they will exploit vulnerable people, and where there's a demand and there's a supply, they will muscle in and do that. And COVID-19 really is a good example of exactly what they will start to do. And I say it won't be unique to the UK. I'm sure, as you just explained there, it's happening in all countries, because where there is such a demand for, whether it be protection equipment or specific equipment to deal with the virus, organised crime groups will work out how to exploit it. And unfortunately, they don't care whether that's to the vulnerable victim of COVID or a supplier to that. So what we've started to see, and we kind of assessed right from the beginning, is that although in the UK at the moment, I'm not sure what it's like in Brazil, but they're just started to ease the lockdown a little bit. So for the last 6 weeks, people couldn't go out unless you were a key worker, either a nurse, a doctor, or a police officer. or you could go out for one exercise a day, which has been challenging for everybody. But it was interesting from our point of view is that actually none of our organised crime group can also go out as well. So we saw a dip in certain crime types. For instance, people can't use the road network, they can't use rail work. So some of the organised crime groups have had to change their modus operandi, if you like, your MO of how they deal with it. Because if they're seen on the road, they're likely to be stopped by a cop. What are you doing? And if they've got any illegal commodities, then they'll be arrested. So we've seen a real slowdown in for instance, drug lines, drug dealing, importation, immigration, because there's no one on the streets. And if you're on the streets, you're going to be stopped by the police, and you've got to have the right documents, etc. So in one way, that's been really useful, but it hasn't taken the organised crime groups long to think, okay, so how can we make money from this? And you know, you and I had these discussions when we were together with the United Nations, is that, you know, organised crime is just a business on the black market. It's as simple as that, really. But there's no rules, there's no regulations, there's no tax. And with that becomes really, you know, a lot of violence and a lot of breaking of the rules. So what we're starting to see across Europe and the UK at the moment is what you touched on, is fraud. So where there's a demand for, whether it be public protection kits for the nurses or for people going about their business, we are seeing quite a lot of stuff that's coming in that is either fake or not up to standard. And behind that, there's no doubt that organised crime will be moving that, because if you think about it as a commodity, that's what organised crime networks are very, very good at. And this is what the work that you and I were doing in the United Nations, where there's no legal system, where there's a big void, the organised crime groups will come in and pretend to be that sort of system for you. So what we're seeing is that they are offering products that will, or they use their existing networks to move commodities about. So where you would see, let's say, drugs being used through a network to be delivered to the UK, we will be seeing other commodities, whether that be fraudulent PPE or stuff that's related to that, because it's a network and it's a commodity. And when you start to look at organised crime as a network that can be used as a commodity, the heads of these organised crimes will just see it as a commodity, and whether that's a child, whether that's a firearm, whether that's drugs or money, or whether it be PPE or equipment to exploit it, they will move that commodity around because they don't want to pay tax on it. They want to get the cheapest that they can, and they want to earn as much money out of it. So we're seeing that this is a real area where organised crime are starting to change their MO, if you like, and exploit yet again the vulnerable people who happen to be nurses and victims of the coronavirus, and organised crime will exploit them. And I've no doubt that you're starting to see that in Brazil and in other European countries. We've seen it as well as the virus has spread. So that's where, if you don't understand your organised network, you're never going to get on top of it, because if you start to understand the network, you can be taken out, whether it be drugs, firearms, or PPE or fraud or anything. That's where you can be more effective. But if you don't understand the organised crime network, you're never going to be able to tackle the problem, because organised crime just adapts to whatever the demand is. And the demand at the moment happens to be, you know, equipment, PPE or hospital equipment, whatever it may be. They will adapt to that commodity. But if you don't understand that organised crime network, you're always playing catch up. So that's the work that certainly you and I were trying to sort of promote, where in war-torn countries, where, you know, the only structure may be corrupt politicians, organised crime networks. We were trying to promote, understand that network, and then you can respond to it, then you can prevent it, then you can intervene or whatever is appropriate to deal with it. So it's just understanding the network. And at the moment, organised crime has just changed its demand because it happens to be related to COVID-19, which is this global problem.
Can you hear me now? Okay, yeah. So I found this being a very complicated issue right now for many reasons. And of course, they're taking advantage of this chaos, this chaotic scenario that we're facing all over the world, and which where when things change, from one day to the other, everything changes. So it's a very I totally agree with you in all this. I even took notes about your thoughts, and yes, totally, to understand how they behave, how the network is adapting to this chaotic this chaos that we are facing nowadays. But how do you think law enforcement agencies can be one step ahead, organized crime? At least here in Brazil, we are facing so many cases of fraud being on the news every single day. And it started with a hand sanitizer. I remember when they, I don't know, February, when they started, like, everybody needs to use a hand sanitizer, blah, blah, blah. So every day police were, seizing, arresting people with fake hand sanitizer. And they were, like, selling for half price, and people, how could they tell, right? So this is, like, I'm talking about a small thing, but of course, as you also mentioned, that in we have those fragile states where the situations ahead, they are already very complicated themselves, and commodities can be from a child or a girl to be a sex slave, or so many things can happen. And I think that right now we don't have air flights. We don't have we have air flights, but very limited. So if you think at first glance, we think, well, it should be more difficult for these people to be doing this type of crimes, committing those crimes. But actually, it's not. I mean, they find their own way, maybe with their own airplanes, their own resources, to be able to change and adapt their MO to increase their profits during this period. So my question back to you would be, how could law enforcement agencies around the world be ahead of these guys? Because I found completely very, very difficult, that's my perception. I found this very, very complicated today. Maybe not in a few months, but today I found it very, very difficult.
Yeah, so I think it'd be nice to give a model to say this is going to stop organised crime. I think the reality is you're never gonna stop it. But what you have to do is you have to prioritise what you can do and what you can't do. And it goes back to really that understanding bit. So even before the pandemic, reached the surface, the different shores and whatnot, really good countries that understand that threat have got a strategic threat and prioritise. So they will turn around and say, the UK will be it's immigration, it's child sexual exploitation, it's firearms, it's drugs. So there'll be certain commodities that we will say these are our strategic threats and priorities over the next 12 months. But what we and other countries do, good and bad and not so good sometimes, is they constantly horizon scanning, that we would call it in the intelligence world, is what's that next threat? What is that next crime type that's coming up? And you've almost got to, you know, when you mentioned how do organized crime, they're very good at adapting, then the police have got to be as good as that adaptation as well. So your traditional policing, you know, in terms of, you know, what you always do, you always get out. You know, good leaders, good managers, and good organizations think differently and always thinking of that next threat. So, for instance, when the pandemic came up in the UK, we were thinking about, okay, so this is going to have a big impact on UK policing for sure, you know, because, you know, what's it going to look like with the lockdown? But actually, how's that going to affect our ability to monitor online activity, monitor the dark web, monitor other, you know, fraud? Because, you know, it's all right having loads of police officers on the streets making sure no one goes out, but actually, if everyone's committing crime online like we're communicating now online, you know, the organized crime will do that. So you have to be very, very broad and open-minded to your thoughts process when you're trying to investigate serious organized crime. And I love a quote where someone said, you know, it's like a parachute. If your parachute isn't open, it won't work. And if your mindset isn't open to organized crime, then it won't work. You just won't be effective to it. So I think what you have to do is you can't always stop it, because, you know, how much I'd love to be able to do that. The reality is we can't. So once you understand it, prioritize what you can do, but make sure that you're horizon scanning across, you know, for instance, we predicted, you know, unfortunately, that we thought we'd see a high rise in fraud, just because we knew that they wouldn't be out in the streets, and people would have to go online to do their crime. Now, that was a good analyst product that probably wasn't a police officer, but is part of a police network, but is part of a team that's listened to. So that analyst will produce something to the senior police officer, whether it be myself or another region or a national or whatever it is, and say, look, we predict with all our analysis, with all our intelligence assets out there, that actually this could happen. And you can assess that and you can say, well, yeah, let's deal with that, or we can ignore it. Now, predominantly the good police services and forces that are out there will listen to those analytical products and start to sort of prepare for that. And what we do to certain successes in the UK is that we always look at under 4 strands. So and it's under the serious organised crime strategy that we constantly review. But we look at prepare. How do we prepare for it? How do we protect? How do we pursue? And how do we prevent? And it's called the 4 Ps. And if you look at it within those 4 Ps, you're starting to look quite broad at crime. If you're looking at just from a pursue element, that you're just going to chase people and catch a smoking gun, or you're going to catch a load of 100 kilos of drugs, you're only ever going to get a pursue element out of it. But how are you going to stop someone? How are you going to prevent somebody? How are you going to raise awareness of how bad drugs are? How are you going to intervene? How are you going to sort of, you know, prepare as an organisation to investigate organised crime? So I think the 4P structure that we adapt on the UK, which is, you know, a variation of many other countries' way of doing it, but it's looking at open-mindedness towards it, not just chasing where the drugs are, chasing where the drug dealers are, chasing where the immigration smugglers are coming in, because you've got to get upstream of that, and you've got to understand it, and you've got to be able to intervene, prevent, protect, and pursue, but not just on its own. You've got to have those 4 strands, in my view. That's where you start to become far more effective.
Thanks, Martin. How is well, according to your explanation, the way you explain, your police agencies are organized in the UK. how good is your information sharing on organized crime? Are the organized crime units within the police departments well connected with maybe a national center? I don't know how that would be. How does that work, especially now during this period of pandemic?
4 strands. So across those 4 P's, if you like, you know, when you prepare, protect, pursue, and prevent. Across all that, what we have is a tasking process. So we call it tasking and coordinating. And again, when we first explain the setup of the UK, you've got local, regional, and national. What we have is local tasking, we have regional tasking, and we have national tasking. Now they're all separate in their own sort of areas of business, if you like, but they are 3 loops that they are all connected to each other. So if you are dealing with something locally and you think, you know what, this is becoming a real big issue across 3 or 4 different regions, they can escalate that into regional tasking. And then likewise in a region, if it's becoming, you know, across all these different regions, you can escalate that up to national tasking. But what's really important, it can go upwards, but it can come downwards as well. So you can task down as well. And that creates this connection between the local, regional, and national intelligence systems. Now, it's not perfect. It doesn't always work, you know, as we like to, because, you know, for various different IT reasons sometimes, and also sensitivity of some of the investigations that are going on at local and regional and national levels. But there is a process there. There's a governance process, what we call a strategic governance group, that actually, if I'm dealing with something locally and I want to escalate this and raise it, I can take it to local tasking, I can take it to regional tasking, and I can take it to national tasking. And there's an audit there, and there's a rationale for why people do or don't take that on. So I think whatever system a country has to deal with serious organised crime, whether it's the 4P strands, you've then got to have a governance structure to how is that interconnected between each other to share intelligence. And on the whole, I have to say the UK is taking its time to get there, but now there is a good information changing, because if you want to intervene, if you want to prevent something, you probably want to do that at the local level. So at a national level or regional level, you'll be wanting to share intelligence with your local partners because you want to stop it at source. So I think we are getting better at doing that. We're not always getting it right, but again, we are getting better at sharing that intel, sharing the problem, and escalating it up and down to all the forces.
Yeah, great, Martin. We have a comment from our friend Joseph from Portugal. He says, that's why international police cooperation is so important. How often do you guys exchange information with police officers from other countries, and how within these 3 levels of organization can affect you directly or not?
So let's use Brazil as an example. So the National Crime Agency, that national level, if you like, they deal with the international and national threats. But what they will have is they'll have a liaison officer in all these countries. So there'll be a National Crime Agent's liaison officer in Brazil, somewhere in South America, where all the issues may or may not come back to the UK. So if I'm a constable in Birmingham, and let's say a Brazilian organised crime group has started to set up in Birmingham, I would be able to start to report on that organised crime group if I knew what they were doing. But I would also be able to reach up into the National Crime Agency and say, hey, do you know anything about Sergio who's just appeared in Birmingham? You know, have you got any checks on him that I need to know about? So there's a process there that through that regional national process, they can reach out between whether it be a memorandum of understanding or a legal document, that we could exchange some information that you might hold in Brazil that's really important for me to have back in Birmingham. But we would go through that process rather than me just picking you up a phone and saying, "Hey Sergio, can you go and check your local systems and tell me what you know about this guy or this gang?" We would go through that process because it protects the source, it protects the intelligence, but also as well it protects us from corruption as well. Is that actually we can do these checks in an audited way? So that National Crime Agency is not only looking at the national UK picture, it's got all the international partners that they can link into as well. And you'll probably be familiar with certain systems that all the sort of Interpol and national forces will have access to, and they can download data onto that the NCA, the National Crime Agency, will have access to and will share with us at a regional, local level.
Yeah, that's pretty much how everybody deals with international cooperation. But then there is a friend, a comment here said that was, you're gonna like this one, with Brexit. What are the main changes for international police cooperation, such within Schengen and Europol and other police cooperation? How do you see with Brexit that could be the main change for the police, international police cooperation?
Yeah, it's an interesting question because when we were working with each other, it was all about Brexit, wasn't it? You know, that was a topical thing in Europe. Brexit seems to have been forgotten now with the pandemic, you know, for understandable reasons. But Brexit is still going on. As people will know, that the UK have left the European Union because we voted as a country to leave that union. But the short answer is that we won't leave the lawful exchanging agreements, and that's what's going on at the moment. So although we might not be part of that European flag at the moment, what the ministers and the governments are organising is how will we be able to lawfully exchange a European arrest warrant, for example. How are we going to be able to dock into Europe and exchange information about an organised crime group in Albania that are now in Birmingham, things like that. I'm fairly confident that that won't change. It will be under different legislations, and it would be easier because we could pick up a phone when we were part of the European Union. But the good thing about that, if there is a good thing, is that it's as important to the Europeans members as it is to us in the UK, because you know, once what we see is if a European organised crime group comes to the UK, for instance, what they will usually do is commit some crime in the UK, but send the funds back to the home country. So it's having an impact on that country as well. So it would be nonsense to think, well, it doesn't really matter, they're not part of Brexit, you know, let the UK deal with it as they are, because it's in everyone's interest to exchange that information. And from my experience to date, that hasn't changed. I don't think it will change. I think there'll be some slightly different legal orders that will be covered, but it just doesn't make sense to cut all ties, legal ties in the European sense to do it. And I don't get the sense that there's any desire, for example, France to not exchange details with us or via Interpol and stuff like that. But it is right. It still needs to be sorted. It will be sorted, I think. It's a headache for someone else, but at the moment, it's pretty much business as normal. We can still have those interactions with our European colleagues, and we still seem to be able to get work done through the National Crime Agency and through Interpol as well.
That's good because you're so close, right? I mean, there are so many going on in the region that would make no sense, even though you guys are in an island, but still, I mean, there are so many flows of people and goods and commodities. So, yeah, so that's glad to hear. But Martin, yeah, I read that since past week, the UK has started to be more flexible on the restrictions of the COVID-19. Um, how do you feel things are going right now in the UK as a citizen and as a police officer?
Although terrible that it is, and we're in our 30,000 deaths of COVID now, which is every single one is an absolute tragedy for the families, for the people that are dealing with it. It's awful for everybody, not only in the UK, across the globe. But I think from that, people are taking strength from that. It's I could talk about COVID in the UK, and you guys in Brazil and Jose in Portugal. It's affecting us all. We know that it's everybody is in this together. And I think from the UK point of view, what's interesting from a policing point, because we had new powers that we could give people fines if they're out on the street. And we could, arrest people if they're breaching and things like that. And yes, there have been some breaches where enforcement has been required. But I think because it's affecting so many people, everybody knows about it. It's almost becoming self-policing. And I don't know what it's like in Brazil at the moment, Sergio, but when people are walking down the street, because we've relaxed, you can go out now and have some, more exercise and things like that. But people will take wide berths of each other. They will move 2 meters away from each other. Whereas beforehand, everybody used to shake hands and have a cup of tea and we'd talk and all this kind of stuff. But I think because people see this international problem, people are policing it and manage it themselves. And I think from my point of view, this is where community policing is really important, because when I said to you, we are there for the community, to police for the community can police this themselves as well, and we've had a lot of reports of community members ringing up the police saying, hey, someone's going out to the park and they shouldn't be. They take it serious, and then the police can go and assess and deal with it. So yeah, for sure, it's horrible, and every victim and every family that's been affected by it's truly heart-wrenching. But most people, because everybody's been affected by it, are policing it themselves as well. And to date, it'll be there's bigger problems, really. The economic problem is going to be huge in the UK, like no doubt in Brazil. A lot of money has been spent on supporting businesses. So the economics side of the UK is for sure going to go down. So how do we pick ourselves up from that? So there's bigger issues out there, but everybody's affected by it, I guess, really. So because of that, people are supporting, and we've seen some amazing acts of kindness, and we've seen some people that know each other's neighbours now and look out for each other. And it'd be really interesting to see post the COVID is how the community rally together to support each other and support policing as well, in terms of looking out for each other as well. So yeah, challenging, difficult. It's slowly getting back to normal, but what's normal at the moment is we're having 300 people die a day, which is still crazy, but it's not as 600 people that we're having 2 weeks ago, and the graph was going up and up. So it's still really strange times, but we seem to be starting to respect each other, look out for each other, and hopefully help each other as we go along.
Yeah, it's good to hear. Here in Brazil, yesterday we had over 800 people death, told that. And yesterday, I haven't watched the news today, but yesterday we passed 200,000 infected and 1,500 deaths. and the curve is going up. I think one of the main problems that we have in Brazil, besides, well, one, we have the country is very big and the geography is completely different from one region to the other, and in addition, we have what we call, let's say, rich states and poor states, or more or less rich, or something like this, which makes, of course, some places to have a better infrastructure, health infrastructure, than other places that don't have. So here in the capital, we were the first one to start with kind of a lockdown, not lockdown, but confinement, isolation, whatever they call. And it seems, and now it's if everything goes okay, on Monday in Brasilia, we're going to start reopening some of the business and some of the, that's the idea. The idea of the Supreme Court has decided that it's up to the mayors and governors to decide what to do, if they're open or not, if they close it. So this is making a huge political dispute as well, because we have election this year so far. So we have people like, some people now are like saying, well, if they don't die of COVID, they're gonna die of starvation because they cannot work, they cannot earn money, they cannot buy food, they cannot eat, and they die. So then we have, it's very bipolarized, the situation. So we have politicians that are extremely in favor of the lockdown until the curve start going down, and then we have others that are in favor of opening everything immediately. We know businesses are, my understanding is business is important, and it needs to be according to the place, because in Brazil we cannot. If you go to the south, I mean, some states there's 0 cases of COVID, 0, and huge states in Brazil, like, I don't know how big they are, but they're huge. There's 0 states, there's 0 cases, and others, the health system cannot have, how to call it, like receive any other patient, because they don't have any type of support or doctors or anything. It has collapsed. So we live in Brazil in a very nobody knows exactly what's going on, and nobody really know, even to know, well, I think he should open, but then after 2 minutes, but what if it opens, everybody start dying? So it's very confusing, because the politicians that should be like, leading the country in a positive way, they are fighting, they are disputing, each one comes with a magical solution, and the other one wants to open, the other one, like here, the government wants to open, the neighboring state, like 30 minutes from here, he says, no way, I'm not. So it's like, completely opposite decisions and perceptions. So I think that, for example, where my family is from, Recife, today they started lockdown, completely locked down, and here on Monday they're gonna open everything. So it's very crazy right now in Brazil, and we go according to the flow, according to the wind. Today is like this, tomorrow is like that. And yesterday, the Minister of Health was fired again, the second one in 2 weeks. And so it's very, very messy, because politicians are really going nuts in a moment that they should be the most relaxed guys. And this is also affecting, because once the mayors, the city mayors, and the governors, and then the federal government, they all have to buy equipment. So they are like also disputing among themselves all the equipments, in the market, like in the international market. So we have equipments bought from the national government, and then we have those who are bought for the local, and those who are bought from the city. So it's like each one's like each one on their own. It's completely nonsense situation in the country, and then we have started just to see for the past 10 days lots of demonstrations to support politicians, which is not, hey, you should, a lot of people hugging each other with the Brazilian flag, supporting this or that, or one or other politician. So I don't see it as being a very healthy moment to the country, especially because even myself, I can tell you something now, and then I watch the news, and then I say, well, Martin, forget it. I think this. Well, even for law enforcement, I was last week there was a demonstration, and then the prosecutors and the judges, whatever, they issue a document to the police on how to behave, because nobody was supposed to be on the demonstrating this time. You're not even supposed to be walking around, and then all of a sudden people are demonstrating on the street. So the police was like, so what do we do? I mean, do we arrest them? And now we have police officers arresting people in some states because it's locked down, you cannot get out, like they were doing in France and Spain and in some countries, which makes a lot of friction between police and society. So and then I have all those cases that I told you about for fraud and buying equipment without just and I can tell you millions and millions of dollars. They're spending a lot of money. And then today they were opening one new hospital yesterday, and then the police went there with prosecutors and judges, and they just closed everything because there was a corruption case. So very, very difficult, my friend. I can tell you that it's a very critical moment for us, and the country is very unstable. Economy, of course, is going, but that's everywhere. Economy is going very bad. But I found this moment to be one of the worst scenarios I've seen in the country, because even during elections and impeachment of presidents, okay, we have huge demonstrations, millions of people, but it's fine. I mean, people are just demonstrating because it's the moment for you to demonstrate and support your candidate, whatever, that's fine. But when you have a health chaotic momentum and people are disputing on political topics, political issues, it's all about politics, I don't really see good things coming ahead. And as I said, our curve is going up. Now we're going to be second very soon. We're now behind Russia, number of infected people. But that's because we don't have enough amount of tests. So it's under notified. So it's very, very complicated. When you said, well, let's talk about organized crime, and I said, well, here it's like should be a case study, it's gonna be every day is like bang, bang. Oh, it's millions and millions of going this way and that way. So we never know. And because of the state of emergency, these authorities, they don't have to go through the law to buy equipment. They can buy the fastest they can. So this allows people to commit a lot of bad things. Unfortunately, that's my own analysis and perception. Of course, if you talk about with my brother, he's gonna give a different one, and the other one a different one. That's very, very sad.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree with any of that, Sergio. And I think, you just got to look at, the business model of organized crime, where there's a demand, whether it be for drugs, firearms, or equipment now within this environment we see them, they will exploit it. And we might not know about it now, but we'll get to know about it after, because they'll adapt. And if we don't adapt as quick as, we're always playing catch up. I think it's interesting to hear where you're at the moment in terms of the Brazil sort of spike, if you like, because apparently we're coming down off it. And I think what we're learning early doors is what we need is clarity in terms of what you can and can't do. Because as soon as there's any confusion, people will blur those lines and stuff like that. And I think now, where everybody understood when you were locked down, you couldn't go out. That's absolutely fine. No one could do it. And it was easier to manage to a certain degree. Now that you can go out for certain roles, or you can go and see certain people, but there's a little bit of confusion because people are going, can I do this? Can I not do that? That's where, hopefully the politicians need to be worth their salt, because we're seeing a lot of questions thrown back at our government to say, well, what does that mean? I'm not sure. And, give us some clarity on that, because if there's not clarity, people will just interpret it their own way. So I'm not suggesting that it's going to get any worse for you, because it's already bad for you, but it becomes a different problem after the spike comes down. And we're seeing that now. It's like, well, what can we do? Where can we go out? What can we do? And not that kind of stuff. So yeah, interesting times, and difficult times as well. And knowing Brazil, the geographic size of it, what a challenge for you. That is huge. How do you enforce that on such a geographical scale of, I do understand that challenge for Brazilians.
Yeah, but anyway, I think we have spoken quite a lot. Taking your fish and chips from Saturday. But I'm gonna. Jose said, "Well, excellent response, Martin. It will be business as usual between the UK and Portugal, at least," says Jose. And we're gonna do the same. A very short, I think. Very short questions and answers to you for the Brazilians. So I'll ask you a question, then you give me an answer, and that'll be fine. So let's say favorite dish, British. Hold on, Wagner.
Salmon.
Yeah.
Salmon fish.
Salmon fish. You see, okay. Favorite drink. Okay, if you're telling to a Brazilian who is going to the UK, okay, this is something you have to try.
Okay, so if you're coming to the UK, then favorite drink, you'd have to go for slightly broadening the island bit here, but my family are from Ireland, so I'd have to go for Guinness. You have to have a pint of Guinness.
A pint of Guinness, okay. A city everybody should go to.
Birmingham.
Birmingham, of course. Some typical traditional event or some traditional event from the UK. Do you think it's nice?
Well, I would have said football, because football is so big, but Brazilians are even better than us at that. So forget the football, because you've mastered that, the Brazilians have. But go and see a cricket match.
Cricket.
The cricket, yeah, cricket is a brilliant day out, because you can sit there. The sun's usually shining. You're allowed to drink alcohol. It's all very responsible. And it takes all day to watch it. So that means you can sit in the sun all day, have drinks, have chats, and watch some cricket. So yeah, I'd go for cricket in the UK, because that doesn't happen everywhere.
Okay. And best TV show, British TV show.
Come on, Peaky Blinders.
Peaky Blinders. Whoever haven't watched Peaky Blinders, please.
Yeah, you must. It's brilliant.
We have some pictures here. Wagner has some pictures that we can show. Wagner. Okay. Okay. That's a Swedish lady. Here's our famous. Would you say Bobby or say Bob?
So they're called. It's called Bobby. Now, so Bobby. This is an interesting fact. So Bobby comes. So the police was set up by a guy called Sir Robert Peel.
Mm-hmm.
So Robert Peel started the sort of the sort of British police service. Now Robert, short for Robert, is Bobby.
Yeah.
So Bobby's on the beat would be Bobby's. Robert's beat, Bobby's on the beat. So that's where the word Bobby comes from.
Okay.
It's short for Robert, and it's Bobby's on the beat. Robert's on the beat.
I see. Robert's on the beats. Okay, good.
That's a Bobby.
That's a Bobby. Okay, that's the typical. I got one of those.
Where did you get that from?
And where is it? You know, my maid, she comes here, she changes everything out of the order, so I never know. So I got one of those from my friend. Okay, so we have a special unit.
Yeah,
okay.
That's the Met. So that's the Metropolitan Police. That's my cat badge.
There we go.
Yeah.
Are the uniforms different from one to the other?
Slightly. The badges will be different, but pretty much all across. They'll look like that picture there. You'll see the Bobbies looking like that. So yeah, pretty much the same.
Okay, perfect. That's traffic police. Traffic police, I assume. There we go. Best TV show on the planet from Birmingham.
Yeah, exactly. If there's one thing people need to take away, is they need to check that out on Netflix.
Yeah, that's fine. We used to call each other. We used to call ourselves the Peaky Blinders from the UN police back in the UK. Obrigado, Wagner. That's Birmingham and fish and chips.
Fish and chips, yeah, perfect. So there's the pub, yeah.
There, that's great.
And there's my tea.
The milk tea. There we go. So we had a little bit of UK in Birmingham, and just to show our viewers, it's gonna be on YouTube, and we're gonna work on the subtitles so people will be able to watch and of course understand. But my dear friend Martin, thank you so much for taking your time on a Saturday. I know it's hot, it's weekend, and you have your family business to do, but it was such a pleasure to see you and of course to learn from you.
And likewise, my friend, it seems like too long since we actually physically saw each other. It was a joy to work with you and your colleagues. And the nice thing about modern technology now is that our friendship continues, and hopefully soon I'll either have a beer with you here or in Brazil. But obrigado, my friend and amigo. It's great to see you, and thank you for everybody that's taken part in this conversation.
No, it was great. Yeah, and of course, as soon as this pandemic goes away, I'm finding my way to going to Birmingham and having a beer in the original Peaky Blinder place and spot. It was great. We had such a great team back in the UN. It was such a nice team to work with. Stella, Rafik, Bruno, and the others. I'm not gonna start citing, but anyway, maybe
Yeah,
we need
no, it
a
is.
we need a reunion in Europe. Maybe in South Spain, where Stella is in Malaga. Maybe we need to have a reunion there.
Yeah, we can guarantee better weather in Malaga than you can in Birmingham. So for you, for sure, it'll be a lot better for you from Brazil. But no, it's been a great experience to work with you, and as you know, and you know, we've got, as we've discussed, we have slightly different ways that we do it, but if you're part of the police family, you're part of the police family, whether you're on an island or, you know, 1,000 miles away. So it's been great to catch up with you, Sergio. Thank you very much, and safe, and hopefully that peak will start to come down very soon in Brazil, my friend.
Hopefully. My best regards to your family, and take care. Be safe as well.
Cheers, my friend. Thank you.
Cheers.